Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. I'm Roop Raj. We have a packed show for you. The day's political headlines, a conversation with a Republican who wants to be your next governor, Dave Dulio with Oakland University, on whether the guardrails are holding up with the Trump administration sweeping executive orders, and how tariffs are hitting consumers where it counts. That with business analyst Mark Lee. A lot happening, so let's get right to it with today's headlines. President Trump ramping up law enforcement efforts in the nation's capital, announcing he wanted to join the patrol with federal authorities who are policing D.C. The president's controversial crackdown in Washington has been going on now for 2 weeks. Scenes like this have been playing out on those streets as hundreds of National Guard troops deployed to patrol the city's streets and parks. He's also vowing to clear out homeless encampments in one sweep. U.S. Marshals are offering rewards for tips that lead to arrests. While visiting with law enforcement and National Guard troops in the Capitol today, he praised their work.
It was worse than ever just a short while ago, but now it's going to be, I think right now, it's better than it has been in years. And in a couple of weeks, it's going to be even far better than that. And everybody's safe now. Everybody feels safe. And they're all coming in. And people are now coming in. They're making reservations to come in. And they want to be in Washington, D.C. One of the things we're going to be redoing is your parks. I'm very good at grass because I have a lot of golf courses.
Today, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that since the president's crackdown started in D.C., 630 people have been arrested by federal law enforcement. She said some of them are in this country illegally. The efforts come as city data shows crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low, but D.C. police also under scrutiny about whether those numbers are actually accurate. Meantime, the Trump administration announcing it's reviewing the records of more than 55 million U.S. visa holders for potential violations. The State Department says any indication of overstay, crime, or terror ties could lead to visas being revoked or even deportation. The Justice Department is about to start handing over documents from the Jeffrey Epstein case to Congress. It comes after the House Oversight Committee sent subpoenas to the DOJ for all files on Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, who recently spoke with the Deputy Attorney General. The first batch is set to arrive tomorrow. This comes as lawmakers on both sides of the aisle seek answers about Epstein's network, as well as his death in federal custody. A victory to tell you about for President Trump tonight as an appeals court in New York threw out a massive civil fraud penalty against him after he was found liable of inflating his assets. The court called the $500 million plus penalty excessive. Part of the reason it ballooned to $500 million is because of interest. You may remember during last year's trial in New York, Attorney General Letitia James accused President Trump of overstating the value of his assets to get favorable terms of business loans. The president says the charges amounted to political lawfare by James and the judge, who are both Democrats. James says she plans to appeal the decision to New York's highest court. And so, yes, we're not through just yet. You know, so far this year, President Trump has signed more than 190 executive orders ranging on a number of topics, including crime, physical fitness, education, and health care. And it's safe to say many have gotten, well, mixed reviews. Several of them, obviously, have gotten a lot of support by people who are lauding it, and others have been blocked by judges. Joining us now to talk more about this, about the guardrails that are in place and these orders, Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio. And Dave, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to The Pulse.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about these executive orders. 191 executive orders pen to paper. But there was, I think, close to 100 of them in which almost 30% of them are held up right now in court. More than 90 lawsuits currently in play. Are those the guardrails that we famously talk about?
They're part of the guardrails. There are any number of other elements that rein in executive power, right? And the crackdown in Washington around crime is yet another example of that. That deployment can last 30 days. To go beyond 30 days, Congress has to approve it, right? So there's a lot of that with presidential power. Where
what if Congress is Republican and they support the president's moves? Are the guardrails still as strong?
Well, that depends, right? That depends on your perspective, of course, right? So there are a lot of Republicans who would say, we don't need guardrails because this is what I voted for. This is what the president campaigned on. He's fulfilling a campaign promise. It's, you know, the folks that disagree would come in and say, well, oh my gosh, we need these guardrails. We have to have somebody rein him in. So it all depends on perspective, I would say.
I think it's so important to note that what we're seeing in D.C., you point that out, and I think it's important that people know that this is only, I think, another 23 days left until Congress can literally sit there and say, okay, we have to decide whether we can continue this. But when President Trump talks about D.C. police, he does have jurisdiction over that as the president. But when it comes to Memphis or New York or anywhere else, Detroit for that matter, it's not as easy for the president to say, I want to federalize. Talk about that for a moment.
It's much harder. The use of the military in domestic situations for things like law enforcement is something that has only been used in very rare circumstances. So this would be another one of those limiting aspects of presidential power, right? Where there are rules in place, not to say that President Trump wouldn't try to push the envelope with them. He has on many other instances. But, I think that's all part of the big picture of the system of shared powers that we have, checks and balances between the legislative branch, the executive branch, and, as you mentioned, all those court cases in the judicial branch.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. There's attorneys general across this country. There are secretaries of state across this country and federal court judges, some of whom were appointed by Republican presidents, who literally hold up their hands and say, wait a minute here, not so fast. So even as a Mack truck may be running through guardrails, the guardrails are in place, according to you.
I would say so, yes, that the guardrails are strong, right? And they have been for going on 250 years in our system of again, checks and balances, shared powers, where we have this constitutional system given to us by the framers that is meant to be difficult for any one branch of government, and it's meant to be frustrating for, say, the President of the United States if he wants to really push something. The courts, of course, can get involved, and so can the Congress.
I find it also noteworthy to talk about what's happening in Texas and California, two of some of the largest states in our country that are literally in this fight right now for districting, redistricting. Talk for a moment about what we're seeing happen in California and what could amount to this huge political fight across state lines.
So it all starts in Texas, really, with the president urging Governor Abbott to convene the legislature, pass a new congressional map for U.S. House seats. And the impetus for that is 2026 is historically speaking, likely to be a bad year for Republicans. So President Trump tries to go to the governor and say, hey, look, pass a redistricting map that will benefit Republicans, will save some seats. Well, of course, that sets off people like Gavin Newsom, who says, well, I see your seats, your 5 seats that you're going to get, and I raise you 10. It is important to know, however, that this mid-decade redistricting is nothing new. We saw it the shoe was on the other foot.
That's
just
right.
4, 5, 6 years ago. So a little bit of context, a little bit of longer term view, I think, is good for us.
And I find that interesting, and I think it's really noteworthy to talk about the fact that redistricting has been an effort made by both blue and red, Republicans and Democrats, as you say, when the shoe was on the other foot. Finally, I want to ask you about the person who's kind of leading the charge out in California, Gavin Newsom. Was this his escalator moment, coming down the escalator to hold a news conference, flanked by a bunch of Democratic supporters, where he vehemently was able to wag his finger at the president and say, I stand for what's right and I will fight it, fire with fire? Was that his moment?
I think he's had a number of those escalator moments, and he's probably going to have more. He'll have more opportunity before it's time for him to decide, am I going to get into this 2028 presidential race, right? It's not even Labor Day of 2025, and we're already talking about the political maneuvering for 2028.
Seems like he enjoys it.
I think he does, and he probably sees benefit, not only for his potential aspirations, but his own politics back in California.
When people talk about how the Democratic Party had an about face after the Kamala Harris campaign, you kind of look at this and say, wait a minute, this may be the face that is helping reorganize the party and putting a face to that name. It'll be interesting to watch.
No doubt about it. There'll be others that want to be the face of that party, too.
Many indeed. All right, Dave Dulio, always great and a fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse tonight. Former Michigan House Speaker Tom Leonard says he's the right person to lead Michigan. He's in Studio C tonight with why, as we give all the candidates a second run on The Pulse on Fox 2. Welcome back to The Pulse, Metro Detroit's only nightly political talk show. The race for Michigan's next governor continues to pick up speed. And joining us tonight, as we invite all the candidates to sit down with us here in Studio C, Republican hopeful and former House Speaker Tom Leonard. And Tom, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
Always enjoy being here with you.
Well, we like to have you here, and a lot of people want to hear from you because they wonder what sets you aside and apart from the other Republican candidates running for governor right now. Let's begin with that field. What's the answer to that question? The number one thing that sets you apart from the other ones who are running?
Absolutely nobody is outworking us. I mean, we announced, I think it was 2 months ago, we've already been to dozens of cities. We've been to the Upper Peninsula twice. But second, the positive vision. I've been very clear. Republicans are not going to win in November if our only message is, I hate Gretchen Whitmer or I hate Jocelyn Benson. We have to have a positive vision every day. That's what we're running, focus on solving problems with real solutions.
Does that work? Because look at the MAGA movement was, in essence, kind of a referendum on so much of what was happening in politics, right? It was a disruption. When you look at kind of maybe getting on those MAGA coattails and saying, hey, why don't we find that disenfranchised Tea Party Republican vote? That doesn't come with being Mr. Nice Guy, does it?
Well, I mean, I spent months traveling the state, listening to people. And what they wanted was somebody that was going to solve problems with real solutions. That's what they were looking for. I mean, I tell people all the time, listen, Donald Trump is his own person. He's the Michael Jordan of Republican politics. You look at the NBA, they've tried to replace or they tried to find the next Michael Jordan for what? 25 years, they couldn't do it. If we're going to win, we've got to be our own person. That's who I'm going to be, a positive vision every single day.
The slam dunks that Michael Jordan had made were indisputable. The slam dunks that President Trump has made have been celebrated in the Republican Party, but not as much with Democrats and independents. How do you plan on defining the role of what it means to be a Republican here in the state of Michigan?
Well, you look at the state of the state right now. I mean, the only state that Michigan beat for population growth in the first 2 decades of this century, West Virginia. We're 49 out of 50 for unemployment. Less than 40% of our children in the state can read at a proficient level. So to me, it's all about identifying problems, going out there, offering real solutions every day with a positive vision.
I know that the work requirement issue inside the budget bill has been talked about quite a bit, but I have to ask you specifically, are you concerned as someone who wants to lead the state about the men and women on the other side of that camera who are afraid their kids and their parents can fall between the cracks because of stringent Medicaid requirements that could end up losing people in the process?
That's not going to happen. In the big, beautiful bill, it ensures that able-bodied adults are now going to either have to find a job, do community service, or go to school in order to get those benefits. I can tell you this, as the state's next governor, I am not going to let children or women fall through the cracks.
What about rural areas and rural hospitals that would lose funding? We're not talking about individuals, but facilities that would lose funding. How concerned are you about this bill hurting folks in rural areas, many of which you'd want them to vote for you?
Absolutely. And again, under my watch and under my governorship, that would not happen. What I believe in is the dignity of work. And when you've got single men that are able-bodied, they're able to get a job, they're living in their parents' or their grandparents' basement.
But Tom, what about the facilities? What about the facility, not the people, the facilities? What would you do to make sure that no one fell between the cracks in those facilities where there was a potential for budget cuts because of the bill?
Yeah, and you were asking me to look at a hypothetical 3-4 years out. I don't know what the budget's going to look like. What I can tell you is I would prioritize those rural hospitals. I mean, let me tell you this. Democrats have forgotten rural Michigan. When I went to the Upper Peninsula, I heard repeatedly about how there was not one psychiatric bed available. I heard repeatedly about how they had not seen the governor in months. I just went to the UP State Fair. She was not there. What I can tell you is under my watch, I have made rural Michigan a priority. Again, I've been to the Upper Peninsula twice already. Rural Michigan will be a priority when I'm the state's next governor.
You got some miles on your car. We know that.
We do.
You were today you were telling me about your trip. But I do want to ask you about the governor, specifically about her relationship with President Trump. What can Governor Whitmer teach Republicans and Democrats both alike about working with a president who you may not see eye to eye with? Well, can't you teach us something?
You've always got to be in the room. Okay, so, I will credit her for at least going to D.C. and being in the room. And when I'm the state's next governor, listen, if we have a Democratic president, I'm going to be in that room to advocate for the best interests of Michigan. You have to be there.
What are some of the main priorities right away that you think that people aren't talking about that you would spearhead right away?
Yeah, absolutely. Mental health reform. I mean, 20% of this state's population is suffering from some type of mental health issue. Half of them are not getting the services they need. We are the one campaign right now that is talking about this issue. Education. Republicans have to take the lead on education. Again, I mentioned less than 40% of our third graders can read at a proficient level. We've got to make certain that we've got the best paid teachers in the entire country, but it needs to be based on merit, not just on being there for another year. So let's pay the best paid, or let's have the the best paid teachers in the country, but let's make certain it's because we have the best teachers.
And that's an investment in our future. You're a father, you're a dad, you love your kids, you love the kids on the other side of the camera. And it is interesting to note that Mississippi outperforms Michigan. We never thought we'd say that.
The Mississippi Miracle. 10 years ago, they were 49 out of 50 in third grade reading scores. With the right policies, the right reforms, and the right leadership, they're now in the top 10. And they did it despite the fact they are one of the poorest states in the country. If Mississippi did it, we can do it here as well. But another big issue, property taxes.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, that is the #1 issue that I hear about. Michigan needs property tax reform, and it needs it now. We've been leading on this issue. It's great. I'm hearing other candidates talk about it now. That means we're leading the policy discussion on this campaign. That's what we're going to continue to do.
What do you tell African-American voters who don't identify necessarily with the Republican Party or some of the agenda items about what you would do to make sure that Detroiters and people also, by the way, not just African-Americans, but low-income, white, brown, Hispanic, everyone, what would you do to look out for them?
I would say look at my history. As a former prosecutor, I saw what happened when somebody couldn't get a felony off of their record. It was my legislation that expanded expungements in the state of Michigan to allow people to get jobs. As a prosecutor, I saw what happened under driver responsibility fees when 350,000 people in our state could not lawfully obtain a driver's license, 75,000 of them in the city of Detroit. I was the House Speaker that made it a priority. I got it done. Imagine a Republican going into the city of Detroit and telling them, I gave 75,000 of you your driver's license back.
Tom Leonard running for governor here in the state of Michigan, knowing the importance of traveling up north and all the way down here to southeast Michigan. We thank you for making a stop here on your campaign on the Pulse. Good to see you as usual.
You too.
Thanks so much. Between tariffs and other economic uncertainties, some Americans are switching up their spending habits. What one business analyst is saying about the impact on our wallets and the upcoming holiday shopping season. Yeah, it's coming up. You're watching the Pulse here on Fox 2. Welcome back to The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. And when it comes to the economy, all three of those are involved. Joining us now to talk about inflation, tariffs, and your wallet, business analyst Mark Lee. And Mark, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here.
Thanks for having me back.
I want to begin with this. I find it, there's like, when we talk about the economy, we talk about two groups almost, and probably more. But one group, we talk about the 401k and the stock market. But I really feel for people out there who are watching that going, wait a minute here, I'm not looking at a stock portfolio. I'm looking at my monthly budget. And that's where things like consumer confidence come in. It's not about the stock market alone. It's about how we feel about our spending habits. Where are we when it comes to that right now?
And half the people are not in the stock market.
Right.
Half the people they don't have 401ks.
Sure.
So those individuals who typically lower to more middle class individuals, those are the ones whose consumer confidence is shaking right now. And what we're finding is that they're concerned about inflation, they're concerned about costs, they're concerned about tariffs. Those individuals who are more financially set or well off, you're finding them, they're still spending money. They're still spending money, if you will, on going to restaurants, traveling, theater, things like that, entertainment. So the former, those are the individuals who are pulling back, and they're less optimistic.
No one has to be performative when they say this, but it's disheartening to think that politicians on both sides talk about the economy, depending on who's in power, but they're talking about stock options and things that don't affect people on Main Street necessarily. And that's a problem when you leave low-income people out of the equation when you're having these conversations, then you want them to vote for you. They don't care about the stock market.
No, that's supposed to be the average person doesn't care about the stock market. Those individuals who are not in the stock market, they don't care. They want those kitchen table issues.
Sure.
Bring that gas price down, all right? Just back to school is starting next week, I think, sometime next week. People are doing their back to school shopping. They're spending more money to get their kids to go back to school. Holiday season is right around the corner. So those individuals are concerned about where my expenditures are today, how much money can I afford to spend. They're less concerned about the stock.
One thing I love about our conversations is you really kind of do try to take the politics out of it and look at it just from a business perspective. I want to ask you about tariffs. Without taking the politics out of it, the boons and the curses of tariffs. What are you seeing as the benefits of the tariffs? What are you seeing as the curse of the tariffs?
Well, I mean, the benefits of tariffs are that you're simply balancing the playing field. Right, so the U.S. is getting more revenue coming into the U.S. as a result of imports. That's probably the biggest boon, if you will.
And attracting big companies to do business here, right?
You know, basically bring your business onshore, invest in the States. The negative or the con, if you will, is that the consumers are still seeing higher prices. See, again, the average person, they don't care about the imports, if you will, per se. What they care about, just tell me what the prices are going to be. And so as we're talking about the future, the balance of the year in terms of expenditure levels, the average person is saying, I just want my prices to come down. So if you have tariffs, they're thinking higher prices plus inflation, plus that means the confidence level is beginning to decrease.
So what happens for people right now who, let's say, need a new dishwasher, need a new car? Where should they be keeping their minds right now in terms of timelines? You know, is this the time to do that kind of stuff, or do you wait a little bit more? Is it more risky to wait?
If you have the money, I would encourage you to go ahead and pay for it now. Why do I say that? Because we don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. The tariffs may increase, they may fluctuate. We don't know that. So I can't, you know, I'm not an expert in terms of crystallizing things, predicting the future.
Yeah, right.
But I would tell people, if you have the money, if you have money in your budget right now, go ahead and pay for it. Because 6 months down the road, that dishwasher might be higher, that car price might be higher. So go ahead and take your time and buy it now.
Yeah, you hear the stuff that came off the crates and that are sitting in stores, there's no tariff on them. But the stuff that, as soon as the tariff is slapped on and the crate comes in, whatever was in that crate, that dishwasher, whatever it was coming off those ships, it's going to cost a little bit more. How does that affect retailers? Talk about Christmas shopping and holiday shopping.
Yeah.
The stuff that we buy at even mom and pop stores, that stuff comes from somewhere else often.
It comes from somewhere else. If I'm a retailer right now, you want to think about values, offering bundle products, bundle promotions, right? Price discounts. That's what consumers are looking for. My concern is, I know here we are still mid-August, I guess, but the consumers are pretty smart, and they're going to start to price shop. They're going to start to compare prices. So if I'm a retailer, go ahead and focus on price discounts, bundling, relationships, anything that you do to offer value. Focus on value, benefits to the consumer, not necessarily pass those prices on. If you can afford it, don't pass those prices on to the consumer.
We keep hearing people use the recession word over the course of the last year and even through a presidential election cycle. But it's pretty clear that it doesn't seem as though right now that there's a recession that's looming.
This economy has been recession-proof to a certain extent. And I think because people are still concerned, they're not exactly sure what's going to happen with the economy. And when you have an uncertain economy like this, coupled with inflation, coupled with tariffs, coupled with unemployment that's still relatively low, people will start to be concerned about the R word, the recession. So you're right. Right now it's still recession-proof, but as this year continues to progress, my concern is recession could be on the horizon.
Yeah, and we talk about people easing, perhaps getting an ease on the tariffs. We're hearing that a little bit from President Trump. Perhaps that will ease some things up as well. We'll have to watch this really carefully. Mark Lee, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse. That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was great to be with you.